Afternoon, and good morning if anyone's joining us from the West Coast. Welcome to R&J's webinar on managing your online reputation. And for those of you who are new to R&J Strategic Communications, we are a fully integrated public relations and marketing agency based in Bridgewater, New Jersey, and we do have a satellite office in New York City as well. My name is Maria Bias, and I'm a digital account strategist here at R&J. And our team specifically works directly with our clients on messaging campaigns tailored to the web as well as social media. As we all know, a reputation takes a really long time to build. You go through all the steps of building up your website, your social channels, and other platforms that represent your brand, and unfortunately, that can be ruined very quickly. And this is even more true today than ever before, thanks to the speed of digital communications. Consumers can post negative comments, reviews, or thoughts at just the press of a button, and this obviously makes it very difficult for brands to keep track of everything that's being said to them or about them online. And in today's webinar, we're going to briefly review some of the tactics that R&J recommends for protecting your online reputation, including, combating some of the issues that we just briefly talked about. So that includes customer voice, reputation management, using social media for customer service. I think, social media is not only a way for your brand to send out messages for everyone, but it's also a way to receive messages back from your audience. People even more so are talking back to brands, and you really need to make sure that you're managing all those comments and engaging with your audience appropriately. And lastly, once the session is over, we'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. So feel free to send along any of your questions in the chat box on your screen, and we'll filter through those throughout the webinar. Okay, great. So I think we're ready to get started. At this time, I'd like to turn things over to today's presenters. We have Steve Guberman, the VP of Creative and Digital Services at R&J, and Tim Gerdes, Director of Digital Services at R&J.
Thanks, Maria. So, as Maria mentioned, traditionally marketing was a one-way process. If you were a brand or an organization, you would have your marketing message. It was disseminated to the media. It was shared in newspapers or on television, and that's how people understood your brand. However, today, things have changed so that your audience have channels of their own. The rise of the internet, and particularly social media, has given everyone who interacts with you as a brand a voice. And what that means is your message is no longer one direction. It actually works in both directions. So as much as you're sending your kind of marketing message out to your audience, they're also sharing their experiences with their audiences. And that's really changed the way that people are interacting with brands today. So one of the things that we've looked at, every few years, Nielsen, the same people that do TV ratings, come out with a global trust in advertising survey. And the most recent survey was in 2015. And I think the important point to draw from this for this particular conversation is, who do your customers put their trust in? Today, the most trusted form of advertising is a recommendation from a friend or family member. This is true of it's more trusted than television, radio, print, anything that we think of as a traditional advertising campaign. The second most trusted form of advertising, however, is one that you have control over. It is your company's owned content on your website. So apart from a recommendation or from a friend or family member, the most trusted form of communication that you can provide is good content on your company's website. The third most trusted, though, which is the one we're primarily going to be talking about today, is online recommendations from someone that your customers don't know. And this is primarily taking the form of social media and online review sites and portals where people are going to find out about your products. That could be something as simple as an Amazon review. It could be a site like Yelp or Google My Business. But this is the most, basically, this is where we see the trend headed. It has declined slightly, and we're going to talk later in the webinar about why we think that might be. But for right now, this is really where we believe brands should be concentrating a lot of their efforts to improve their standing with their customer base, and we'll talk about some of those tactics as we move forward. So basically, if we're looking holistically at online reputation management, everybody today, if they don't have access to a smartphone, which most people do, they certainly have access to a computer. And there are a variety of sites, in addition to social media, that are places where people can leave feedback about your brand. And this can become rapidly overwhelming because there's so many of them. The tool that we use, I think, tracks 85 different sites and looks at what people are saying about you across those sites. These may be customers. They may be employees. Glassdoor, for instance, is a site where your actual employees can be sharing their experiences about what it's like to work for your brand. But in general, we're going to look at sites like Google, Yelp, Yellow Pages, Facebook are the primary ones where people are leaving reviews. But then there are a lot of other specific to industries, WebMD, Health Grades. If you're a real estate organization and you have apartments or homes that you're selling, there are places for people to leave their experiences specific to real estate. So really what we recommend is finding out where your audience lives online and speaking to them in the channels that they're actually using.
So typically what we'd like to recommend for any brand is kind of some of the tactics that are integral in monitoring your online reputation. Typically that'll start with the brand health, which is a wellness check for your company. It's the overall service set that we offer. That includes monitoring audience sentiment. What do people think and feel about you? The competitive landscape. What are your other brands doing online similar to yours? How are they interacting with their customers? Monitoring and responding to online feedback, whether it's positive or negative, whether it's posted on review sites or it's directly sent to you through messaging apps. Your mapping data and making sure that that's all synchronized. Social media accounts, and again, making sure that you're fielding comments, feedback, and response times well. And then review solicitation. We'll probably say a number of times throughout this webinar that people are going to be real quick to complain online using Twitter, Facebook, Yelp, etc. But for as many negative comments as there are out there, there's a great number more positive comments. We just need to remind people to leave those online for us. So whether you've got a tactic through email or SMS, but we're asking people to leave those reviews. And then do you have intervention tactics in place? And that all kind of bundles up into our brand health service that we work with our clients on. So we know people are talking. We know that there's a lot being said. Whether it's a new movie is released and within the first hour, Rotten Tomatoes has it rated, or a restaurant opens. But we know customers are talking about brands. These are examples of some dashboards from two popular reputation management tools, Hootsuite on the left and Sprout Social on the right. And it's an example of the kind of data that we can get on brands. Everything from social accounts, user demographics, geographic locations, brand sentiment, things of that nature. And so these are the kind of things that we make sure and encourage people to get baselines on for their brands. The different social listening platforms, there's numerous of them to use, but it's important to kind of keep your finger on the pulse of your own brand, report on it regularly, and see how it's changing over time.
And just to add briefly to that, we think that this is important to start with, kind of as that, Steve mentioned as a baseline, just because, if you're going through any sort of reputation management process where you're trying to improve your reputation or build your reputation, understanding what the conversation is today before you do any of that is a good place to start, just because it gives you a benchmark to work from. So the next thing that we're going to talk about here is mapping software and why it's become increasingly important in this process. Stepping back from that for a second, though, briefly, one of the things that we've long advised our clients to do is make sure that their name, address, place data is updated online. This is also known as NAP data, NAP. And basically, there are a variety of sites, some of which we've mentioned, Google My Business, Yellow Pages, City Search, Yelp, where you can actually list physical attributes of your location. And this is important for search engine optimization because search engines are likely to rank you higher if your data is consistent and accurate across all of those directory listing sites. So as I said, we've long recommended that our clients actually make sure that their directory listings are accurate. This is becoming increasingly important, though, for two reasons: iPhones and Android. 77% of Americans now own a smartphone, and people will tend to use those smartphones when they're looking to find a place of business, use their map software. And on the iPhone, when you do a search with Siri and it brings up Apple Maps, it incorporates an aggregate of Yelp reviews into that service. On Android, it brings in Google My Business reviews. So basically, you now have a situation where a potential customer's first impression of your brand is going to be when they actually access their mapping software to find out where your location is, and they can see all of those aggregated reviews from other customers. So it's incredibly important to make sure that not only is your NAP data updated, but that data that's being shared with those mapping software applications that are on everybody's smartphone present you in the most positive light, because it's really the best chance to make a good first impression.
So one of the ways that you're able to kind of get an understanding on what the reviews are that are out there is using a tool. We've got a tool that aggregates data from up to 85 different review sites and allows us to see where people are posting. When we onboard a client to the tool, we'll be able to help the client figure out, have customers or consumers open their own location. Like Kim mentioned, you can go into Facebook, and if the restaurant I'm at doesn't have their own location, I can just create my own and leave a really great review about the burger I just had. Now you've got all these rogue locations. So this is an example of a listing of one of our clients that happens to be a multi-location medical office. Here's some different reviews between Google, Facebook, Yelp, and everything from 1 to 5 stars and what was said about them. A dashboard like this gives a client the understanding of what's been posted out there and has it been responded to. Can they kind of check it off their list of things to do? But knowing what people are saying as you start to get an understanding of how do I manage this process is a great way to start things out.
And, to clarify here too, one of the things that we think is advantageous for internal customer service departments is that because this is all aggregated, it can really streamline your internal workflow. Rather than having to go out to Google and Yelp and Facebook and these other sites separately, by integrating them into a single dashboard, you can get a clear picture of what that audience sentiment is online, but also use a single resource for actually responding to critiques. The next phase of this, which is also integrated with the tool that we use, is actually review solicitation. So what you just saw was basically monitoring reviews that exist today when people go to these sites independently. But the next phase is really actually soliciting reviews from your customer base. And we generally do this in one of two ways, through either an email or a text message that's sent to a customer after an interaction with your brand. So your customer will have an experience with you, and then a day or so later they might get an email or they might get a text message and say, hey, what did you think of your experience? And one of the things that we have done for clients, which we don't necessarily recommend, and we'll talk about why it can be a problem later, but it's actually kind of intervening with negative reviews and encouraging your customers to post positive reviews. So when it comes to negative reviews, when they get that email or text message and it's a 5-star rating system and they only give you 2 stars, what would happen is they'd receive an email or a submission form, and it would say, hey, sorry to hear that you didn't have a good experience. Can you tell us some more information about what happened? And by doing it this way, it's kind of removing somebody from the negative review path and hopefully, intervening before they get to the point where they're leaving a complaint on one of these review sites. If somebody had a great experience, though, what we would then do is encourage them to go to a Google or a Yelp or a Facebook and say, hey, we're happy you had a great experience. Would you mind sharing your experience with the community on one of these websites? So it basically is a way to kind of intervene when people are not satisfied and encourage people who are satisfied to leave positive reviews.
And, Tim mentioned that that's two of the tactics we have is email and SMS, and there's, half a dozen other ways, you can encourage customers or consumers to leave reviews. Email signatures, you can put a button on your website, you can put, there's all kinds of tools. Even at brick and mortars, we see you can put a postcard that says, hey, go to this web address or tweet at us and we'll, leave us a review. So, thinking creatively out of the box, how can we encourage consumers to go online if we're confident that there's going to be positive reviews? And again, if there's not positive reviews, how do we use those to enhance customer experience across the board?
So here we just want to take actually a look at a real world result. This is actually using our review management software with a R&J client. This particular client is a doctor and has medical facilities throughout the state of New Jersey and has had problems with negative reviews online. So we started in the beginning of September with a campaign for this client where we started asking people to leave feedback. And we did it just as we outlined previously, where if somebody has negative feedback, there's an intervention and it goes directly to the customer support at the doctor's office. But if they had a positive experience, we encourage them to leave feedback online. And as you can see from the graph at the bottom, our number of reviews have skyrocketed since we started this program simply by asking for feedback. And you can see, too, that our average rating has jumped 1.2 points in that period of time. So we had a lot of negative reviews out there, but by asking our audience to leave feedback when it was positive, it's actually boosted those numbers significantly. And again, this is only really over the course of a month that this has happened, and the star quality of those reviews has been boosted dramatically, and we've seen a big turnaround in the online presence. So part of it is just simply, asking everybody to respond, because often, it's the complainers or the people who are dissatisfied who will resort to going to a website to complain about you, but just reminding people who've had a great experience, hey, can you leave feedback too? And that simple act has really turned things around for the online reputation of this particular client.
Yeah, and I mean, this client, they just weren't asking. And so in addition to a lot of the great reviews that they received, they were even able to kind of mitigate some negative things, some billing issues that a couple of their patients had, and just things that were lingering. They were able to clean those up. And then again, they were able to address customer care issues through the feedback they got through the online form. So, and also like Tim mentioned, having an elevated star rating through Google or Yelp is going to help your local listing on a mobile device or in a web browser. If somebody's searching organic results, you're going to show up better based on your rating through Google or Yelp. And
one other advantage to using a system like this, internally, if you have multiple brick and mortar locations, it's valuable to see, because it can all be aggregated across the board, where you may have customer satisfaction issues and where you may not. So if you have multiple doctor's offices, for instance, and you can see that one is getting much worse reviews than another, it can point to maybe some staffing or customer service issues that you may have at individual locations. So by incorporating all of those locations into a single review platform, it gives you that visibility to how you as a business are performing in different locations.
So before I jump into the next part of asking for online reviews, we've got some cool questions coming in that Maria's going to help us work through at the end. But if you have additional questions along the webinar, definitely feel free to drop them in the question box on your screen. So asking for online reviews is not a new thing. Amazon started doing it in about 1995 when they really put e-commerce on its head and opened what's now the world's largest e-commerce website. So it's kind of taken a turn for the worse as brands are trying to game the system. we know, and Amazon figured out really early, that, as Tim mentioned earlier, people are going to buy things online or even in person that they know have really good reviews and really good ratings. Most consumers will go to the review section very early on in the purchase process. So brands have started to game the system, and they'll either pay influencers to leave really good reviews or just flood their own product pages with really good reviews. So as technology gets smarter, brands will not be able to game the system as much. The result of all of that back and forth is obviously consumers are getting leery to what's actual and what's not. So that's Amazon's take on it. And then another example is Sephora got caught up in a scandal where there was automation being used to send emails that never really were sent. So definitely it's good to, from a consumer standpoint, make sure you know what you're looking at, and from a brand standpoint, authenticity is key there.
And, just going back to the beginning again, where we said that this was a trusted form of advertising, these abuses may shift that, and we think that that may attribute to some of the small decline that we've seen in that trust as, people try to game these systems, audience skepticism about whether or not those reviews are legitimate. So while we think it's important, we also think it's important to be cautious and, to use these systems as honestly as possible. And, we certainly do not recommend trying to game them or trying to, position false reviews to boost your rating. Yep. So, as we've talked a little bit about these online review sites, but another big area of customer service online is social media. And in fact, this has sprouted an entire new industry, this idea of social care, where brands are using social media platforms to do their customer service, to the degree that the 1-800 number has really been replaced by the internet and social media, mostly because of its immediacy. And brands, or rather businesses and consumers both, are using social media when they do their research, when they're investigating which brands to partner with or which brands to buy. People are now using social media as part of their online research to determine what type of business you are. In addition to that, according to J.D. Power and Associates, more than 67% of consumers have now used a social media platform to engage with a brand. So they're reaching out to you on Facebook or Twitter, and they're asking questions, and they're using that as their customer support, again, because we've seen that shift away from the 800 number, and people are looking to immediacy. And to that point, we've seen other data that a quarter of internet users in the United States who have contacted a brand on social media expect a reply within 30 minutes, regardless of when that contact was made. And more than half of internet users in the United States expect the same response time, whether it's a night, a weekend, a holiday. So they expect that no matter what time of the day it is, if they're reaching out to you on social media, somebody is going to be there to respond. And that creates a challenge, particularly for smaller brands. And we'll talk a little bit about ways you might be able to alleviate that, but know that the danger in social media and not responding on social media is that your audience, your customers, are going to get very frustrated very quickly. So the first place we're going to look at is Twitter. And, I think Twitter was probably the first customer service platform as far as social media is concerned. And this is really where that immediacy sprung from. And there's some, kind of do's and don'ts that we want to review with Twitter specifically. Best practices suggest that you really want a dedicated customer service Twitter account. So if you have a brand actually having, Adobe is a good example of this. Adobe, in addition to their main Twitter profile, has an Adobe Cares profile, and that's where they're managing kind of those customer service issues. It's important to display support hours, again, setting that expectation. If people expect that you're going to respond within 30 minutes and you're not going to, it's important to be clear that you have dedicated support hours on social. We also think it's important that your customer service reps sign, usually with initials, the responses that they have. One, for internal accountability, and if you know which reps are responding to which issues, if there's a problem down the road, or if something escalates, just really understanding how effective your customer service team is. But more importantly, because it adds legitimacy to your customers. One of the other things that's critical here is, while it's important to start the conversation in the public forum, because Twitter is a public forum, you want to get that conversation into a private channel as quickly as possible. So one of the things that we think is critical, you need to have the support option enabled on your Twitter account. This will allow you to communicate with your customers via direct message, so that they may leave you a tweet. You can respond to that tweet, but then as quickly as possible, you want that conversation to move to the direct messages channel, which is private. So just looking at some of the brands that do this right, you can see that all of these cases, you've got the customer service person has left their initials. So again, we're saying that it's a personalized response. There's a person that it's accountable to. It's not just a chat bot, or it's not just a Twitter bot. And you can see too, one of the other best practices that we recommend, leave links to other support tools that you have online. So there are some questions that you may get asked over and over again, and if you share your resources to your audience, it's not just the person who's receiving that response who's getting that, it's everybody publicly. So they'll see that, oh, this question's already been answered, and you can kind of offset some of that, some of those questions to self-care. So by sharing links to relevant resources or troubleshooting tips that you've already established, it can kind of divert some of that audience to that self-care. And another point to the fact that this being a public forum that we think is very valuable, you as a brand can share positive feedback. Because it's public, when people are praising you, when you've done well, when they're happy with their customer service experience, you can actually retweet that, and your audience at large can see that, hey, this is a brand that cares, that they understand their customers, that they want to make sure that we're happy, and it just helps to boost your online reputation as a company that's committed to customer service. Some of the things not to do on Twitter, some brands have established bots which impersonate customer service reps, but as you can see from a couple of these examples, the bots really don't have a very good sense of whether or not somebody's happy or dissatisfied, so they end up responding to really negative comments with positive, chirpy, upbeat responses, and that's tone deaf, and it just kind of exacerbates the problem. So certainly you shouldn't be using bots, particularly if they can't distinguish between the tone of your customer service complaints. You should not share, as in this Equifax example, broken links. As we said, it's really valuable to share links, but you want to make sure that they're right. You want to make sure that any of the advice or services that you're directing your customers to are working, that they're online and they're where you're linking to. Otherwise, again, you're just exacerbating the problem. And you also really do not want to argue with your customers in a public channel. Certainly, there are going to be people who who are abusive or you disagree with, but there's no value in a brand actually combating those arguments with a hostile tone. And again, this is one of the reasons why we think it's important for your initial response to be public, but to get those complainers to a direct message channel as quickly as possible, so the audience at large can see, yes, you've taken this seriously, yes, you're responsive, but the actual inner workings of the particular complaint are kind of moved to a private space.
So as Tim said, Twitter kind of, the Twitter sphere pioneered the either griping or asking for help scenario for consumers. While Twitter's got about 335 million monthly users actively, Facebook's dwarfing that with 2.2 billion monthly users actively. So obviously, Facebook's become quite the homestead for people to complain or ask for help or get support that they might need to. So for brands, it's a great place to manage that system. Some of the best practices for a brand on Facebook, obviously make sure that you've got messaging enabled. Once that's done, it'll allow consumers to engage with you. If you look at the screenshot on the left, from a consumer standpoint, if they click on Get Started, the brand gets to see who they are, and they can send a direct message right to the brand. You can set expectations. Tim was talking about some bad scenarios on how bots have been used. We definitely think bots can be great for initial messaging, like middle screenshot on the bottom, where you can guide the customer journey and say either, hey, we'll get to you within the next hour, or customer service isn't open until 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, we'll get back to you then, or, hey, we can help you in one of these 3 ways, pick your option. Some of the bots can get pretty sophisticated, and you can really map the journey of a consumer, but keeping it simple and setting expectations is ideal. Also, if you use bots too much, it loses the personalization and therefore lacks authenticity. So definitely use with care. But the more responsive the brand is, if you see the middle screenshot on the top, Facebook lets consumers know this company is really responsive. They respond typically within X amount of hours. And so the app within Facebook is really good at letting consumers know that, yeah, you should message these guys because they'll get right back to you or not. So they make that information publicly available. And then, the other thing that happens is if there's messaging that goes on a public post on a brand site, you can message the person directly. You can also hide their comments without them really knowing that you're hiding it. And so if somebody gets belligerent or out of line in the comments on a public post, rather than deleting it and further aggravating them, you can just hide it as the brand, and they won't really be aggravated by that as much. So just one way to kind of mitigate aggravating somebody further. Facebook, I guess in the past year or so, has bought Instagram and brought some of their messaging tools over to Instagram. So Instagram is also a great source for building an audience and curating that audience, and therefore it's also really great for customer service, because if you enable a business account, as seen on the screenshot on the left, it puts communication options, as shown on the screenshot in the middle, to allow a customer to call your store or email you directly, or even get locations to your business or directions to your business right through the Instagram app. So it makes it real easy, real consumer friendly. Again, it's direct messaging, so it's not public. But again, you could have a customer on one of your posts complaining or complimenting something that's going on. So bringing that into a private channel is always the preferred and recommended route. And then integrating Facebook with Messenger is really smart, or Instagram with Facebook Messenger, because it's all in one place, as you see on the screenshot on the right. You can manage all of your messages between the two systems directly in one spot.
So, just to summarize too, and these kind of this advice goes for both social media, which we've discussed, and the larger online review platform network that's out there. We believe it's important to respond to all feedback. Basically, at this day and age, again, because everything is so socialized, you're not just responding to an individual customer complaint anymore. You're actually responding to your entire online audience, so that when you respond to all complaints with some level of response, it shows your audience that you are attentive and you're concerned about your reputation. So we recommend that in all cases you should be responding everywhere. Again, personalization is key. While we believe it's important, particularly if you're in a crisis scenario, that you want to make sure that you're in tune with your crisis messaging, but it's important that while you repeat those themes in what you're telling your audience, that the messages are individual and they're personalized, because that adds to their sincerity. If you're just saying the same thing over and over again, and it's basically just repetitive, it's going to be very clear that it's just an automated response, or it's just a canned response, and that's likely to alienate people who are already dissatisfied. To that point, we think it's really important that you have a messaging protocol. So you want to have kind of those key points which you think it's important to address that are shared with customer service, or in those customer service responses, but really having a kind of a protocol established so that you can import certain talking points into your responses, so that while they are personalized, while they are individual, they still have that overall kind of messaging that you want to get across. We understand, though, that this is a big job, and I think it's important to recognize that not everybody has the resources to have customer service in place 24 hours a day, and you may not, as a brand, have dedicated customer service resources. We think, though, that it's important to have a clearly defined customer service role defined as part of someone's job responsibility, and that you have the resources to do the job in whatever way you set out. So if you expect to be answering social media responses like we recommend, you have somebody who that's their job, and you set the expectation for when they're likely to engage with customers or respond. By not having that visibility to when you're available or when you're going to be responding, that's going to lead to that alienation, just because expectations today are you're online, you're going to be responding, and it's going to be quick. That's where the market is, unfortunately. So again, just having that protocol and then having the resources defined to respond in whatever time frame is established as part of the protocol that you set.
And finally, before we get to some questions, just kind of to review how R&J works with some of our clients on our overall brand health services. The overall brand health services that we put in place accomplish a number of things for our clients. They're ongoing for them because it's not a one-time quick fix solution like most online and digital tools, even offline tools for that matter. It's an ongoing process. But it starts with standardizing the NAP data like that Tim talked about. Let's take ownership of the Google My Business places. Let's make sure that the messaging is consistent across all of the locations on Yelp. The map listings are accurate. The logos are accurate. Make sure that all that data is accurate and owned through a business account that the company owns. We set up social listening and reporting on audience sentiment and competitive landscape. So again, we're setting a baseline of what are people saying about the company, what are the competitors doing that stands up to what that client brand is doing. Set that up for a baseline and set up for ongoing reporting and comparative analysis. We work with our clients on setting up customer service on social media, and whether we're helping them write protocols, as Tim mentioned, or we're doing response and funneling it through the right channels. We put those processes in place with and for our clients, and whether that means setting up initial automation or ongoing automation for user journeys, that's a key part of it as well. We do a lot of response protocol development and preparing messages for online responses. As Tim said, we think it's important to respond to everything, and if there are not responses prepared, not to say that they're used exactly every time, but as a guide, then it can be really overwhelming, even for just a short number of reviews online. But knowing what to say in any situation, whether it's an interview or responding to an online review or responding to an email complaint, working with clients to get those things established are important. Review monitoring and review solicitation. Again, there are a number of tools out there. We've got a really great tool that we're actually rolling out now for clients to use on their own, but it allows us to monitor up to 85 online review sites and then solicit new reviews from existing and current clients. Again, it's either through email, through SMS, or a half dozen other online or offline tools, be it handouts, postcards, email signatures, or integrating to websites. people are talking about a brand, let's make sure that, it's being either published live to elevate the brand, or if it's negative, let's make sure that we can help fix any challenges that exist. Reporting and evaluation of KPIs, we do that on a regular basis to make sure that clients know where they stand in the competitive market space. We establish goals at the onset and make sure that we're hitting those goals, if not exceeding them. And if we're not, what do we need to do to adjust on a regular basis to make sure that we are? I mentioned the tool that we're rolling out. TrueGrade is a service that allows us and our clients to monitor, manage, and guide customer reviews. It's a really powerful and simple online tool. And as we roll it out, we're really excited to tell people about it in a short amount of time. So I think Maria's got some great questions that we're going to field real quick. If you've got any additional ones, definitely send them over.
Yeah, I know we're kind of running short on time here, but let's try to squeeze in a few questions. Kind of scrolling through the questions, I know a lot of people have this similar question of, we mentioned we should respond to all, negative comments, or all comments, including negative comments. How do we deal with those? Is it okay to block people or post on social media? So kind of how to go about that.
So I think the short answer is yes, we want to respond everywhere, but there are also going to be cases where it's apparent very quickly that certain people are never going to be satisfied and that there's nothing that your customer service team can do to help them. So this is, again, why we recommend that people move to a private channel as quickly as possible. And then, I think it becomes a judgment call on the behalf of your customer service reps where if, you've exhausted every attempt to satisfy someone, that there are going to be people that remain unsatisfied in the end, but by moving all of those conversations to direct messaging channel, you're not really airing that laundry in public, so to speak. And, certainly on a site like Facebook, as Steve mentioned earlier, if people are being negative or abusive on your website, or your Facebook site rather, you can actually hide their comments so that they're not aware of the fact that they're hidden. If they log into Facebook, they still see their posted comment, but it's not visible to the rest of your audience. So there are ways that we can kind of mitigate the damage from, a hypercritical customer. But the key here is, while yes, we recommend you respond everywhere, it's not worth chasing everyone in order to get them to the point where they're satisfied, because that's just, not realistic. And, your customer service reps should probably be the best judge of when they think someone is not somebody that they can recover, if you will.
And I think we have time for one more question. Kind of jumping from negative, going to positive reviews, how can we amplify the positive reviews that we do get? Do we need permission from the person posting it in order to share it on our social channels or website or any of those other platforms?
You don't really need permission. And again, one of the ways that we do amplify is we ask people to, we solicit those reviews and have them post them on sites like, again, that are public forums, such as Google My Business, Yelp, Facebook. And brands can, and in fact, the tool that we have has a plugin that you can actually put those positive reviews on your website, so it will import the best reviews to your site from those channels. There's not really any hard and fast rule, and by posting something publicly, if it's positive, certainly we can share it. And it really goes back to just that soliciting and just asking people to be honest about, their experience.
Okay, great. Thank you, Steve and Tim. Thank you to all our viewers here today. If you have a question that we didn't get to, feel free to send Steve or Tim an email or tweet them. We have their handles up there at RJSC Steve, at RJSC Tim, and we'll be in touch. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the webinar.
And we'll be posting the slides in an email to everybody who registered and attended as well.
Yes, so you will have that copy. All right, great. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for your time, everybody.
Bye.